Thank you, everybody. Good morning. It's lovely to be here and see so many people in Newport in our conference. So I'm going to speak about free speech today, this morning, which I think is a topic that is very, very close to our hearts. And I know in the political sphere in the UK, there's no other party that has free speech as a section in the manifesto. And the manifesto that was published in 2018 had that section. And I'm responsible for that because I wrote it. So if you don't like it, you can blame me. The other parties are either actively trying to undermine and erode our freedoms, which we've had for hundreds of years, or are completely silent on the issue. Now, last Saturday, I wrote a tweet, which I do sometimes, and I know some of you follow me, which is very wise. And my tweet said this: there are two sexes, not 100 genders. Oh, yeah. You can wait till the end to clap, it's okay. But I don't mind, you can clap more if you want. It's quite nice for me being up here. Mass rapid immigration is unsustainable. There is no climate emergency. Boys need fathers. Sharia law is incompatible with English law. Unborn children are children. Hashtag free speech. Now, I was astounded by the response I got to that simple tweet, because to my mind, those are 6 statements which are self-evident truths, it's banal, it's mediocre. 30, 40, 50 years ago, no one would have blinked an eyelid at anyone who said any of those things. But I got more response and likes and retweets and comments to those 6 statements than in 10 years of using social media, which was really, really interesting to my mind. And these are some of the written responses and comments I got back. There is a climate emergency, you reprobate. You're hiding behind free speech, classic. Don't mistake free speech for your bigotry. Where do you even begin when an elected representative has thoughts like this? And so those were some of the negative comments, but I must say that most of the comments I got back were very, very positive, actually. Lots of people wrote spot on. I agree 100%. Someone even wrote boom with a little fisty emoji, whatever. It was just very nice. But there were some longer comments as well. Someone wrote, wow, just wow, brave man. Who's going to post his bail for saying this? Please run for mayor. Well, I might do. Be good to kick out Sadiq Khan, wouldn't it? Are you looking forward to a stint at Her Majesty's pleasure in Pentonville? Now, this was a very poignant one. Thank God you have lifted my spirits. I now realize I am not alone. Wow, how provocative, but how true. I applaud your truthfulness. So stunning and brave. Be careful, you'll be receiving a visit from Khan's thought police with talk like that. And I can't believe we live in a time where this causes controversy. So what on earth has happened to our country where people would respond jokingly, but only half jokingly, that by saying these things, I might be in danger of getting a knock on the door by the police or perhaps ending up in prison. Now, we're not at the stage yet where that would happen to me, but people are considering that this is a possibility. And this is a country which for hundreds of years has been a beacon of free speech and openness and tolerance in the true sense of the word, where you can say whatever you like. You have freedom of belief, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of conscience. And we accept that we might not agree with each other, but we will respect each other's opinions and agree to disagree. But what's happened when we are now living in a country where all of these things are being eroded and dismantled and deconstructed? Now, I joined UKIP 6 or 7 years ago, one, because I wanted to leave the EU, and two, because I could see the growing beast of political correctness, and I could see that it's suffocating our country, and if it goes on, we're going to end up in a place where our freedoms are going to be taken away. And UKIP was the only party that I could see which was going to stand against this political correctness and stand up for freedom. And I personally got more interested in freedom of speech when I had a couple of personal experiences on it. Before I got actively involved in politics, I was a chemistry teacher, and I've been a chemistry teacher for 20 years. And so as a teacher, I kept my head down, I would just go with the flow, and I would think things, but being in chemistry, it's not a particularly controversial subject. So I didn't really, well, it maybe is now, but, I'm sure they can make everything controversial these days, but it wasn't at the time. And so but I had no reason to speak out about things. But since I've been in politics, people ask me hundreds, thousands of questions all of the time. And 2 years ago, I was standing in the UKIP leadership election in 2017. And there's a group associated with the party which does great work called Support for the Family, supporting traditional family values. And they send a questionnaire around to all of the candidates. And there were lots and lots of questions on this questionnaire. Some were about family, some were about transgenderism and these kind of things, and some were about Islam. So I answered the question. I thought nothing of it. But one of the questions was, what's your view of same-sex marriage? I said, I don't agree with Cameron and Clegg's redefinition of marriage. I think marriage is a man and a woman. And I said if I was ever an MP and I had a free vote of conscience on it, I would vote to restore the traditional definition of marriage, which is a man and a woman. And there was thank you. There was another question that says, do you believe that sexual orientation is determined at birth? I said, no, I don't think so. I don't believe there's any evidence for a gay gene. That was 2 years ago, but a couple of weeks ago, that has actually now been proven. And even the BBC that we've just heard about wrote the story and reported on the story that says now there's concrete evidence that there is no such thing as a gay gene. So I was right 2 years ago. But I also said, to back that up a little bit, there are some studies which have come to the conclusion that there's a higher percentage of people who are homosexual who've had child sexual abuse than in the general population. That's a statement of fact. There are some studies that have come to that conclusion. So I thought, well, okay, this is just a scientific statement. Okay, that's my opinion. Job done. Answered the questionnaire, move on. But within about 12 hours, there was a storm coming my way on all channels on social media. There was a group of people that said I should be thrown off the leadership contest, I should be thrown out of my position of education spokesman, which I was doing at the time, I should be thrown off the London Assembly and no longer allowed to represent UKIP because of my terrible, bigoted, homophobic, transphobic, xenophobic views. And they got in contact with this rag called Pink News, which represents LGBT issues and so on. And for a couple of days, I was the headline story on Pink News website. There's this terrible politician who has all these homophobic views and so on. But it was really, really hard at the time. It's the first time I've experienced a whole storm coming my way because I had a certain socially conservative opinion, and that was not acceptable to some people who say they are liberal, but then wanted to destroy me and to destroy my reputation. And it spread further. Other people started commenting, and it got in the Independent. Even the Mirror reported on it. So this was really difficult to handle. But so many people in UKIP supported me, sent me messages of support, and I will always be thankful to Raheem Kassam, that some of you may know. He's a wonderful figure in the conservative side of politics who actually wrote an article supporting me in Breitbart. So I was very grateful to that. Lots of people came to say, we're with you. We agree with you, or maybe we don't agree with you, but we agree that you've got the right to say it, which is tolerance and freedom of speech. Well, I had another kind of storm coming my way earlier this year, but because I'd had that experience 2 years ago, I was more prepared for it this time. And again, I just said something I thought was a little bit funny on social media. You have to be careful with this. But there was a story in the newspapers about Brexit, to do with Project Fear, which never seems to stop because all the Ramonas keep on making up rubbish to try and frighten people. And I think it was sort of March or April, there was a story running in all the papers saying that Brexit means Britain's more likely to get hit by space debris. Because we're coming out of the European Space Agency, we wouldn't have satellites looking for asteroids which are going to shield us and protect us. Obviously, the rest of the EU will be completely safe from any asteroids hitting them, but Britain wouldn't be, and that's because of Brexit. And so I put out a tweet saying, Project Fear goes full retard. Now Brexit means the sky is going to fall in. Now I didn't know that some people would get offended by me saying the word retard. Now, it's not something that I clearly didn't mean any offense to people with genuine learning disabilities at all. It was making fun of the Remainers who are making up rubbish about Brexit. And it's a meme from a film which is widely used on the internet. There was a film which was released in 2009, I think, starring Ben Stiller, a Hollywood actor, well known. And in this film, Tropic Thunder, there's a famous line, if you're into the sort of funny things on the internet and memes, that says, "You went full retard, never go full retard." And I thought it was funny. So I just put it out. And I got a huge storm coming my way by all these kind of lefty people saying how terrible I was and how hateful I was. And this was a hate crime. They're reporting me to Sadiq Khan, but he's smaller than me, so it's not that scary. So, and this went on for 4 or 5 days. They even wrote to the Labour Assembly members who brought it up in the London Assembly and asked Sadiq Khan about it and said how terrible I was for using the word retard. Okay, I haven't used it much since then, but I mean, this is kind of ridiculous when people are trying to cap and suppress your freedom of speech in such ways which are obviously not offensive at all. So what is giving rise to all of these things? Because our freedom is being lost. In terms of legislation and these kind of things which are going on, one of the worst pieces of legislation ever to have been passed in this country is the Equality Act 2010, which was put forward by Harriet Harman in the last days of the Blair and Brown administration. And the Equality Act has something in it called the Public Sector Equalities Duty. And that means that anybody working for a state organisation, such as schools or universities, perhaps the BBC and so on, have to foster good relationships with groups and people with protected characteristics. So if you're a teacher working in a school, a doctor working for the NHS, or a nurse, or a psychologist, or a policeman, or a fireman, they want to try and get rid of the word fireman these days, don't they? Even Fireman Sam's going to be retired because he's a man. It's ridiculous. But anyway, the public sector equalities duty leads to all of these kind of public organisations, schools, police services, NHS trusts, having codes of conduct which will regulate your speech. So if anyone says something which is perceived by anybody to not foster good relations with anyone with any protected characteristics such as a gender, one of the 100 genders that we have, according to these people who make up the new rules, or so on, or race or religion, then you are in breach of these codes of conducts which all these employers have, and you can be disciplined or no platformed or even fired. And this is what's leading to no platforming in universities. We have people from as diverse as Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who you may have heard of, is an ex-Muslim from Somalia and a victim of FGM, who you would think that most students in universities would be really, really keen to hear about and interested in what she has to say. But she's been no platformed because she's deemed to be not fostering good relations with Muslims because she's an ex-Muslim, which is where we are in terms of organisations having to obey the Equality Act. Germaine Greer is another one. I mean, Germaine Greer was a feminist, a radical feminist. Now, I'm not a radical feminist. I don't particularly agree with radical feminism, but now the radical feminists of yesteryear are finding themselves being no-platformed because they don't agree with the transgender ideology and they say women are women. Women can't change into a man. You might think you are, but you can't because you have, or men can't change into women because you have chromosomes and you have your birth anatomy and so on. But those are just people who are being no-platformed. We also have people losing their jobs. And I met a lovely young teacher. I won't say his name, but it's from Oxfordshire. And he called a girl a girl who was in his maths class. And the problem was the girl wanted to be identified as a boy. But he called the girl a girl, actually by mistake, because he did try to adhere to the rules, but just spontaneously he went to her one day and said, "Oh, great piece of work, girls." And the parents complained, and he got suspended, and he got fired. Which is absolutely ridiculous when we've got a huge recruitment and retention problems for teachers, particularly maths teachers, that someone is going to be fired for calling a girl a girl. I mean, how ridiculous is our country becoming because of all these rules which are being brought in and this legislative framework which is being brought up, which is undermining freedom of speech. Criminal law is also being introduced. I mean, the Equalities Act concerns employment and no platforming, but we do have certain laws which are undermining freedom of speech, not least the Communications Act 2003, Section 127, which says that if anybody sends a message over a public communications network, such as Facebook, Twitter, whatever, that is deemed to be grossly offensive, indecent, obscene, or menacing, that's a criminal offence. The problem is, it's very, very hard to define what is grossly offensive. So some people who just simply tell jokes or may say things which, yeah, they are a little bit offensive because comedy can be offensive to some people, but funny to other people, are finding themselves being dragged through the courts and imprisoned. And one example of that is Marcus Meechan, otherwise known as Count Dankula, who made this video about his girlfriend's dog. Now, I don't think that's a very wise thing to do myself. I wouldn't advise anyone to make such a video as that video that you may have seen, but it's not a criminal offence. Well, it shouldn't be a criminal offence, but actually saying that has been deemed a criminal offence by the Scottish courts, and he's been fined and has a criminal record for making something which some people thought was a joke and was obviously intended as a joke. So this is where we are in the country. But the country, I think, is crying out for an end to this madness, because outside the liberal, metropolitan, cultural, Marxist, socially liberal, Fabian London bubble, people are just sick and tired and fed up of this absolute drivel and nonsense which is coming out of them all the time. And we need to end it. And this is why I'm still here, because we need a party like UKIP that is for Brexit, absolutely, for a no-deal WTO Brexit, but is for beyond Brexit as well, to re-establish our freedoms and stand up for our heritage that has been handed down to us from our forefathers so we can pass them on to a next generation. Let's carry on and make Britain free again. Thank you.